CMMS Radio talks about all things CMMS, computerized maintenance management software, focused on maintenance management. It's the people, the process, and the culture that make your CMMS journey a success.
Just writing my next article for Reliable, and I was like, what do I write about? I'm going to write about being a veteran.
There it is, man. And this is it. So everybody, thanks for tuning in. We did this last year. It's that time of year again, just in time for Veterans Day. We've got installment number 2 of Maintenance Sea Stories, and we are joined by Howard Penrose. He's the motor doc, and Bryan Bieschke. I don't know what to call him, but he always tells me, Greg, I'm just a mechanic. The only rules here is we're telling stories, talking shit, and having a blast while honoring our U.S. military veterans. First off, guys, I want to thank you for your service, and all military veterans of the U.S. military around the world. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Welcome back to CMMS Radio, guys.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for having us. Yep.
So, last year when we did this, you guys probably were thinking of some stories ahead of time and we could run and gun right into it. This time is a little bit impromptu. Everybody's been really busy this year. Bryan just got back from a trade conference. That was PAC Expo. For anybody that doesn't know, Bryan Bieschke, he's a CMRP. We obviously know he's military, and he's doing all kinds of cool stuff over at Upkeep. He's head of partnerships and community over there. I'm an ambassador. I'm part of their ambassador program. Howard Penrose, the motor doc, everybody knows he's the motor doc. He's out on the road doing some field work, much of which he can't really talk about because he works on that kind of stuff. He's that respected, that connected. But one of the things, he's also an Upkeep ambassador, but he was just telling us a little bit about an article he's working on. And I wanted to ask you, Howard, just out of the gate, tell us a little bit about Reliable. You're working on an article for that publication, and you're also part of their heavy hitter team of experts.
Yep. Yeah. As a matter of fact, part of my goal is to do what I did with another online magazine and get out an article a week. I'm figuring at this point that's my primary way of getting information that I've gathered over 35 plus years out to people. Right. So, you know, there's really that I'm kind of watching a lot of the guys who are experienced or veterans of our industry, you know, writing more and more. We're encouraging them to write more and more technical, not marketing articles, but actually technical experiences. I'll say, yeah. So as a matter of fact, in this one, my plan is to submit one that actually talks about, you know, a little bit about my experience in the military, but more so what happened as I left the military and how that followed me through the years, like the actual, what I felt like and what I had to deal with. And, you know, everything from having way more knowledge than the person that was interviewing me at a first job. So being a winding journeyman in the Navy, sitting down, you know, every question he asked about every connection, I was able to respond on paper without a book in front of me. And he said, I'm going to tell the boss that you don't know anything about how to wind motors. And I said, why? And he said, because you'd be my boss. You'd have my job. And he's passed away now, George Iliadis, and it's kind of funny because I did become his boss a few years later. But yeah, it was very interesting coming out as, you know, at the time I was just about to turn 22. I had a great deal more experience. I was the youngest person there by 10 years. I had more experience than any one of the, you know, of the folks with, you know, 5 to 10 years experience. The older guys definitely.
You know, Howard, you know what we say, right?
Yeah.
It's not about the time. It's about what you've done with that time.
Yep. And that's actually part of what I just literally wrote that. there's something about being in the military where you constantly have to be doing something. You have to be learning. You have to have the gall to ask for advancement and do all the qualifications. And you're not babysat. I mean, they give you all of the tools to do it, but if you don't want to do it, then you don't advance, and they basically get rid of you. So, if you
100%.
want to stay in, you have to, climb the ladder. So getting back into the civilian world, that's not always looked at kindly, if you know
Well,
what I mean.
interesting that you say that, because
Yeah.
with some of the people that come on CMMS radio, not just the two of you, but we hear these stories about making that transition. So that's going to be the kind of
Mm-hmm.
article that I think the three of us would agree adds value. It's got nothing to do with marketing. It has to do with, where can I learn, read about, hear about something that actually happened, how it really went down, maybe a different way somebody could think about it if they're in the military making that transition, and maybe even for them to just get a good kind of, hey, I remember that. Yeah, that's a really
Yep.
big challenge. I want to ask Bryan a quick question. When it comes to that same thing, now that you're, um, at all these conferences and talking to people that are maybe making that same transition, how could you tie that maybe to a story from when you were in the military, and then how it kind of translated into the civilian world without knowing what Howard's writing about, but kind of the general spirit of that theme?
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, when I was getting out, I was preparing as best as I could to kind of understand where my skill sets and the things that I was good at and what I was learning on a day. How did that transfer? Like, what was the civilian terminology for the things that I was doing or the stuff I was working on? A lot of it, does translate, but it gets kind of convoluted. Like I'll give you an example. Like when you look up the AS rate, aviation support equipment technician, which I was. I worked on generators, static frequency converters, cranes, AC drives, like all kinds of stuff. And then you look at the transitioning role and it says bus mechanic.
Yep.
So it's like I fully understand like the difficulty and confusion of trying to get out and start that process. But tying the conferences into it, you talk to veterans. People come by, you'll see they're wearing their retiree hats. They're wearing a Marine Corps shirt or something. And if I'm lucky enough to get them to come talk to me, or if I snag them up, that always comes up at some point. I always want to tell them I was in the Navy, and they always want to tell me they were in the X, Y, and Z. So those conversations are being had everywhere, but I do think that there's some convolution in understanding what your job is in the Navy or the Army, military, whatever, and what does the civilian world call it? Because according to them, I'm a bus mechanic.
So Howard, when you hear that, like, you have some thoughts running through your head. You got a story for us around that?
Yeah, I basically ran into the same thing, and I was still naive enough to believe what I was being told. So I thought that I could only ever be a certain thing, and luckily I had people around me that were like, "Why are you just doing this? Why have you locked yourself into this?" And kept pushing me, because they'd see, you know, I would build my own. I was a mechanic and field service guy during the day, and in the evenings and weekends I was hanging around with my nerd buddies building computers and learning how to program them and all this other stuff. And I mean, that just carried on for forever. I mean, I had access to the Argon's mainframe when I was in high school. So yeah. So when I was in the military, we were supposed to be the first paperless ship, which meant that they added 5 times the filing cabinets on before we went to sea the first time. but we had to understand some of that stuff, and I'd go down and hang out with the folks, and we would do some of that. And so when I got out, it was a hobby to me. I didn't realize I was doing stuff that they weren't even learning yet in college.
And you were only in high school.
Oh, I was doing, yeah, in high school. I was, my dad headed up the Department of Environment out of Argonne. So he was doing work for the Navy and Coast Guard while I was still in high school. And he had developed the first firefighting gas sensor. And you might have run into this too, right? So the one where you could use the gas sensor over and over again instead of putting in the glass modules that had a one-time use.
Mm-hmm.
And I think his was for the Coast Guard. It was would detect like 35 different gases and the percentages in the atmosphere. And then later he developed the sniffer for airports where they could detect drugs and stuff like that, and had developed the volcano meter. This is all, well, the volcano meter was later. It was for detecting gas output on gaseous volcanoes, like the one in Colombia that erupted back in the late 1990s and killed all the volcanologists that were installing the meter.
What?
Yeah.
Brutal.
So they were installing the meter because they knew that there was going to be an eruption at some time, and it detected it, and they couldn't get off on time, and almost 300 volcanologists were wiped out. So they had a big, they were having a conference there and the reason why was because they were taking a look at it. So I met the leader of that group afterwards. But yeah, so and that's when I was learning, because I got to play with that stuff with my dad, right? So on the weekends, he would have that stuff home on the weekends and play with it. And I was learning about how to preserve energy, how to, so that you had like one of the big 6-volt batteries. That 6-volt battery had to power a computer, micro etched pumps that would take in a molecule at a time and everything else for a year. So we were learning how to conserve stuff. All the stuff they're trying to figure out now for accelerometers, right? The battery thing.
Mm-hmm.
Then we, and then when I went to the University of Illinois and I was running the Energy Resources Center, I got to actually calculate the efficiency of a micro etched pump, which meant we had to explore it with with a microscope because you couldn't see it with the naked eye. It was a pump on a chip.
I'm looking at Bryan, and I'm just thinking, when I edit this down, I'm gonna put like a bubble. I'm gonna put a bubble ahead above his head that says dogs or cats.
Yeah.
What?
But I mean, these are the things I was doing. In the meantime, everybody, people where I was, everybody was telling me I was just a mechanic or just a this or just a that. In the meantime, I was taking on every predictive technology I could get my hands on, learning it inside out. From vibration to my first exposures with electrical signature analysis, infrared. Basically, there's not a technology I didn't get my hands on. I had early exposure to things like partial discharge testing and everything else. So now I then I was sitting on the standards committees. Now I don't know if you guys knew this. Last month, I became the USA rep for Seagray, appointed by the IEEE for electric machines. Yeah.
I think I saw that on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah. So that's basically, formed in 1921, that's the collaborative research effort of 105 countries on specific transmission distribution projects and everything else. So all that stuff I've been writing about all this time, next week I'm going to be in Raleigh at a Seagray meeting talking with, we're going to have the DOE, NIST, all of the top researchers in the country related to the national grid, because this is the big kickoff.
It's nice that
So
you're meeting to
I get to
discuss those
participate
things.
in that. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's all been in the works. One of my group, MotorDoc AI's primary research area has been on alternative energy impact both directions from the grid, right? So we've been working with NREL and other international wind groups on, what's happening from the grid that's impacting our equipment. So it's, sorry.
No,
A lot of
like I
acronyms,
said,
right?
That's actually what I'm down here teaching at a service company right now.
and
So,
Bryan, what about when you and I talk about, so Howard, Bryan and I talk about you sometimes. So if your ears are ever ringing, and what we talk
that's why I'm
about
wearing
is
this.
yeah, we talk about, a lot of times we talk about things like, real deal pros. I like to say people that have been in the trenches, people that can tell you these stories. And in this case, you guys both having these experiences in the military and how it starts to unfold in the civilian world, and how you kind of still maintain those foundational elements that, kind of are part of who and what you are, the DNA of how you move through the world, whatever I'm trying to say here. I think you get the point. But when we're talking, we talk about some of the podcast episodes that you put out, and some of the papers that you put out, the articles that you write, and you're just so natural about the way you explain it, and you just swim in this. And it's like, for most people, I think, like I'll speak for myself at least, it's like, man, that's like quicksand for me. Like I'm gonna go down quick, and I'll be like, I don't even know what I'm hearing here. So I have to go through slowly and take it in chunks. And we literally, I think it was like 2-3 weeks ago or something like that, we were talking about how for you, that's a primary language. It's just like automatic for you. And it's such a good thing, because when other people explain this, they might not understand even one iota of what you're saying. And at least the way you do it, we have opportunities to kind of get it and understand it. And I think it's a rare thing that people can explain that kind of stuff. So I really appreciate that.
It speaks to application, right? I mean,
Yeah.
when Howard has done things, it's not just talking about the theory of it and that the definition and blah 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 blah. It's taking that, putting it in practice, learning all the things that that come with that application that you're not going to find in those other realms, and then he's able to articulate it.
Yeah.
And then
you mean like what I just did for the last 9 weeks?
Yeah. But you love it. You love it.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, we got in a big argument at a conference, myself and a speaker. He spoke on stage, and I I've got it. I guess I have this reputation that people think that I will be the speaker assassin, but I've been on the receiving end. So I'll go in, I'm really interested, and I'll sit there, and all of a sudden I'll watch a speaker watching everything they say, because they know that they're my competitor and they think I'll call them on it. And why would I want to, it's also happened with some articles. I won't name who, but I will refer to it in an article and say, I read this article and it's so completely wrong. Well, in this case, it had to do with ChatGPT, large learning models, Python, and the ability to generate real meaningful software from that. So I did it.
I'm not the guy. You would lose me. You would lose me.
Well, but I learned a lot from it, and I had been an early adopter as an industrial engineering professor back in the 1990s. I was exposed to machine learning and AI. I had to teach it. We called it modeling, right? We knew what it was. We were working with it in IEEE, and we were lots of papers on it. So I'd been exposed to it for a long time. So when the LLMs came out, the first thing I went is, oh no, everybody's going to think this is the solution to expertise. And this little project proved to me the exact opposite as well. So across 9 weeks, 1.5 weeks was giving prompts to, different learning models, not just ChatGPT, but all of the other support ones for Python and others. They're all called Copilot this and that, right? Not just the MS Copilot, but there's also one for GitHub and so on. And going through it, and then after a week and a half, then spending the next 6.5 weeks troubleshooting it to make it work. So several things was, if I was an amateur programmer, if I didn't have my background, I would have been completely lost after the first 1,000 lines of a 10,000 line program, because that's what it is. It fails. It doesn't help me anymore. And by the way, every time I ask the same question, it gives me a completely different set of code. So I have to know what I want my code to do, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this all goes back to way when, right? And the second thing was, I had to be an expert in what I was trying to accomplish. So this was a motor current signature analyzer. And actually, I was just playing with it before the lights went out, of that size. Yeah. It's a Modal Shop makes the hardware. And I had seen them at the Vibration Institute, and he was talking about Python code. That was the little argument. And so they sent me a device, and I created a product that we now sell.
Nice.
Yeah, well, I've been following along with that too.
Yeah, and it was, but the key was, I had to understand. I had to be the subject matter expert, meaning I had to understand what the program had to accomplish, and what it had to do, and what the alarm levels were. I had to understand the software, not at a minor level. I had to be an expert to understand when the generative AI was giving me false information or starting to drift. And it kept reemphasizing the whole idea of drift the whole time I was doing it. So it's a problem I see with a lot of these predictive AI and generative AI systems that are out there, is that after you run them for so long, they begin to drift. The accuracy starts to go away over time. So it can be really accurate in the beginning and then becomes less and less accurate, and you have to be able to deal with that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Sorry, a question about that.
Yeah.
With that being the case, is that something that has to be managed ongoing? In other words, you can't just let it loose and let it out in the wild and it's all going to be okay. It's going to drift. And if anybody's incorporating these technologies into other technologies or uses in their maintenance processes, they have to not only be aware, but they must be vigilant. Otherwise, it'll turn out bad, right? It'll be inaccurate.
Yeah, I think here's my biggest point in all of this. Everybody thinks I'm anti-machine learning and AI. I'm not. I use it heavily. That's why I don't have 1 million people working for me, right? I use it heavily. It's really good for making me very, very efficient, but I can't trust it. Okay, it's like having a really bad employee who lies to you a lot. So, or a whole group of them, depending on what you're doing. So, when I see people market their system as a replacement for people, I know for a fact, I've lived with it since forever. And when I hear the challenges that, yeah, we can replace your people, you can have less people, you don't need to find people with experience because you can trust us, just buy our stuff. And so I go out and challenge it. I don't just challenge it by viewing it. I see if I can also create it. And, there's times when we have, but then it starts to drift, right? So what I keep trying to explain to people, and it comes across as being negative about machine learning and AI. I was just told this today. But is that you don't need less experience. You actually need people with more experience. and they're going to be more effective. They have to know. So if you put in a vibration program, for instance, or an ESA program that relies upon, what we're calling machine learning, what we're calling AI is actually still machine learning. The marketing people are calling it AI. There was a pushback even by IEEE, and they finally gave up. They even tried calling it augmented intelligence at one point. So if you look at the standards as this all began, they were calling it, it's not, augmented intelligence, so that they could go along with the marketing articles. And finally they gave up. Now we're calling it AI. It's machine learning.
Yeah.
It's still tables. It's still going in, and you still have human bias in it. It's not on its own, right?
Yeah. Well,
it doesn't think on its own. I think now we're calling it, what was machine learning became AI, became AGI, artificial general intelligence, and now it's ASI, artificial super intelligence, because each marketing person is trying to outdo the others. But if I go back and I look at the basic algorithms, there's still the machine learning stuff.
Mine's going to be
the data. It's just the data and the ability to manage the data.
Mine's going to be AMI, artificial mega intelligence.
That's right. Yeah. That's the next one.
Yeah, you got to go bigger and make it shinier and make it more sexy.
But from my experience from the military and the transition to civilian life, because I didn't realize the company I went to work for, let's just put it this way, when I went to, it was a toxic environment. So when I ended up going to the University of Illinois, and I ran into the university politics there, right? First, the military side of me, when I was being confronted with people that wanted me to give certain political opinions in my engineering classes, which never made any sense to me. I'm like, you guys do understand I served in the Reagan military. I was Reagan Navy. Sorry. So, and the other part was, the politics that occurred there didn't even come close to the politics from the company I had left. Right. So it was like a breath of fresh air, and people are going, "Oh my God, that's terrible." It's like, yeah, but it's normal to me. But all of that and digging into things all came from the military. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when somebody would get in my face, let's say, I always jokingly say, you never you never get in the face of a power lifter, will headbutt you. Well, that's actually from my experience in the military. You don't back down. I'm sorry.
No, you find a fan room.
Yeah. Yeah, something like that. And we had the biggest fan room of any shop in the electrical department with gates at both sides, because it was we were down by the nuclear welding shop.
You could always tell you could always tell when someone wasn't about it, because when you did say you want to find a fan room and they said no, or they went away, you're like, they weren't about it.
So let's switch gears a little bit, and because I now you got something I'm really intrigued by this, because that would constitute a true maintenance C story. Is there anything you can share, Bryan, about this concept of the fan room? Let's find a fan room that you kind of encountered, without saying any names or anything like that, but like where, let's say
are we past the
I'll give you like the general thought on it. So when you're in any kind of confined living quarters, ship, submarine, whatever, the berthings are not big. You sleep 3 high, right? You can't even sit up in any of them except for the top one, maybe, depending on how high the ceiling is. Yeah, or if you're tall like Howard.
Yeah, but suicide bunk.
But so you're constantly with these people, and if you if you have a problem, you can't get away from that person. It's not like you can just go home,
even on a carrier.
Yeah, even on a carrier, 6,000 people, you can't. You're gonna see them. They're gonna be around. They're not going anywhere. So sometimes it gets to the point where it's like, look, we got to settle this and then just let it be, because it's going to eat both of us to death if we're constantly can't get away from each other and we're not going to solve the problem. So you can't fight openly in the military, right? And ships and aircraft.
Unless you have a rewind shop.
Yeah. If you have, carriers, all these places have tons of crawl spaces and rooms and things that their sole purpose is for one thing, and no one's in there all the time. And each department would have like jurisdiction over certain spaces that they had to clean and maintain, even though they weren't associated with what we did. Right. So we all knew that. And if there was an issue and you just couldn't bear it anymore, you say, hey, let's find a fan room. Let's work this out.
And the nice thing about fan rooms is all of the ventilation is covered.
It's covered in padding.
With padding.
It's got insulation.
Yeah.
So
yes.
So you can see we both have the experience.
You would figure it out. And generally, if you did ask somebody to do that and they said no or punked out, it was in front of the berthing or in front of everyone. So it would end because they got chumped in front of everybody, right?
What about when they don't do that? Is it kind of like we're gonna handle our business, and we know no matter what, in many ways it's going to be fair. Like you're not grabbing wrenches and stuff, and when it's done, it's squashed.
You don't have to be their best friend, but it's squashed.
There's been a few times when a couple of us have looked like we fell up and down ladders.
Right.
Let's just say I know how I will deal with confrontations if they become physical. We had enough of that. We're not Marines or something like that where that's actually part of their training. It was literally, let's go. We had a gentleman and I, there were some rumors flying around. The ship scuttlebutt is a big deal. And somebody had said something and it got attributed back to me. So he came down and confronted me and I denied it, of course, because I hadn't done it. And so, it came down to that. And so we looked like we fell up and down a ladder meaning the stairs, when it was all done. And when we were asked by senior folks, we just said we fell down a ladder, and that ended it. And when it was done, it was done. He and I were also both weightlifters, so we had we were constantly training in the back. So yeah, we had to go down after hours and fix a few things, but
okay, well,
that would happen on occasion. I mean, it literally. I mean, I wasn't on a vessel. I wasn't at sea for 6 months during my career. I was on a ship that was being built. Yeah, so that's a little more stressful.
Yeah,
but when the ship's being built and you've got a lot of things going on, and you're around the same people every day, and you're pier side, but you're simulating being at sea. So you're not going to go see your girlfriend or whatever else. It can get a little. You can get a little weirded out, especially when you're 19 and 20 years old, right?
Sure.
So yeah.
So now, you remember last time, guys, I threw some terms out there. I asked you what some stuff was.
Oh, no.
Yeah. We got it. We got to do it. We got to do it.
Don't make us look too bad.
No, this will be good. So, Bryan, you ever heard the term old salt?
Yep.
Old salt.
Yep.
Old salt.
I mean, I think I know.
He's in the newer Navy. He won't know.
Yeah, I don't think I know.
All right. That's so real quick, Howard. when I say old salt, what am I referring to?
It's either somebody who's been in the Navy a long time or somebody expected to be a lifer. So I
Okay.
was actually termed as an old salt,
Got
even at my young age. Nobody thought I'd get out. I mean, I was in my environment.
Cool.
So,
All right.
yeah.
How about, have either of you heard of a killer tomato?
No.
A killer tomato is a large reddish orange inflated ball used in gunnery practice at sea.
I don't know.
On an aircraft carrier, you'd probably be just talking to the Marines.
All right.
On the carrier, we didn't. I don't think anybody shot.
We didn't.
It was
The Marines
all
did.
this was all automated. Like all of our air defense stuff was all automated. So like the Sea Whiz and all that. So they would drop flares from the SH-60s, and then the Sea Whiz automated 20 Mike gun would, shoot 18,000 rounds a minute at it.
Yeah, like for us that aren't in.
We called it the R2D2.
Yeah, the
okay.
R2D2. Yeah,
like that.
There is no. You can't, dude, Greg. You can't hear the cycling. There's no cycle of. It's literally like it sounds like
something ripping.
Yeah, it just goes.
Yep.
Wow. It's wild. I got a few more for you. Have either of you heard of a Mando Commando?
No.
All right. Well, since I said it, I got to read what it is.
Term, Greg. Next time, do your terms or acronyms from 1988 to 2013.
Well, all right. I'm gonna go.
You have to remember, like we didn't have Wi-Fi access on board ship because it didn't exist.
Yeah.
We had to wait for letters.
Mando Commando is a sailor assigned to mandatory physical training, Mando PT or FEP, for being overweight or failing the physical readiness test. And I used to think that was known as a fit rep.
Yeah. So we used to call it. On the ship. It was called FEP, FEP, and it stands for like physical. Not physical. It's something, right?
It's derogatory.
Yeah, so
it really is.
Yeah,
yeah.
So I'm going to say.
Okay, we're Go ahead.
We would call the group fat enlisted people.
Yep.
Okay. And getting back to another term here. Have either of you heard of the term gator freighter?
Yeah.
Gator freighter?
Gator freighter.
Yeah.
What is that? Like an LHD or an LHA?
Yeah.
It's a ship used in amphibious warfare or generally the transportation of Marines and their equipment. You and I were talking about it earlier before you jumped on, Howard. Yeah, because we're talking about the USS Peleliu. I've been on it.
Okay.
Well before they sent it for decommissioning on the other side of the world. And what I was talking about is when I wasn't in the military, guys. I have a family member that was, and I got to go on that ship and tour the entire ship. And when we got to the top, it was like walking through these like amplified huge parking ramps because you can drive these vehicles up. It's just gigantic, right? And we get to the top and I said, okay, I'll go down whatever that thing is on the side of the ship, which if you're not used to it, that's kind of sketchy because you're up, I don't know, 7 stories in the air.
Mm-hmm.
And that was pretty wild. So that's what that is. I got another one for you. Oh man, do I do this? Do
it. We're not PG on this one.
Yeah, that's true. Good point. So have either of you heard of a happy sock?
Of course.
Not at all.
Of course.
Well, we'll just it's what you think it is, folks. We're not going to describe it. So
nope.
It's a happy sock. How about an oil king? Neither of you?
No.
All right. Oil king is an enlisted engineer responsible for fuel, lube, oil, boil water and feed water testing, and
Oh, you mean
also
a machinist mate?
Yeah.
well, and they
All tech.
didn't put it in here, but they put a boiler tech BT.
I don't think
Okay,
that's,
so
is that even still a rate?
that was we actually had on the Roosevelt we had boiler techs because we had a boiler in case the
Separate
nukes
from
went down.
MMs?
Yeah, well they were a sub rate of MM.
And
So boiler tech is a real rate.
and further down it does say machinist mate, and I remember learning a little bit.
Machinist mate, hull tech, boiler tech. Yeah, in my 19 in the early, mid 1980s, we still had a lot of boiler techs. I don't know if they're around now.
I've never heard that.
Yeah, my work right now with NavC is primarily on the electrical side. So
Would a fireman's apprentice relate to any of those roles?
yeah, every person involved in the maintenance side of engineering side of the thing. So when I enlisted, I was a fireman recruit, fireman. What is it? So E1 was that, E2 was something else, E3 was fireman apprentice, and then you went through your petty officer.
No. A fireman apprentice was E2.
Was that E2? Okay.
Yeah, E2, and then E3 was
fireman.
was
fireman. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yep. So, yeah, as you can see, it's been, a while. Actually, I was just writing about that because, I was going what my rates were when I was coming up.
Would that be a track? This is just my random question, and then I got the real big glossary question for you. But as it relates to this, the Oil King, machinist mate, fireman's apprentice, all that, isn't that kind of a track where people that kind of sustain that and then they start progressing are probably going to be on a track to become an engineer?
Well, not necessarily.
Okay.
So the track went like this. You had the officers, then you had the real people, right? No, just kidding. So you start out, you go into boot camp as an enlisted person. You're a fireman and recruit, then a fireman apprentice, and then you go to whatever rating class. Or if you aren't, you're just still a fireman. But like I went to electrician's mate, so I was briefly an EMFN, so an electrician's mate fireman. So that just meant E3. Then I became an EM3, which was an electrician's mate third class, and then second class, first class. That's on a track to become a chief. So the chief is the real backbone of the military. It's a big deal, right? So you're basically, they still have to salute officers, but the officers ask them the questions. They're the guys who are boots on the ground. They're your frontline real supervisors, right? So when I ran the rewind shop, they had to advance me to E5 meritoriously because I held a chief's position. So I had for motor repair, I held the authority of a chief, but I was a second class petty officer, which means as far as giving somebody an order, I was kind of stuck. But they had to advance me to that because I could only hold that supervisory position 2 rates below.
And then
so in order to run the repair shop, I had to be an E5.
And what was your track again? I don't know if you're supposed to call it that for you, Bryan. Like you go to boot camp.
You can call it a track.
What was your track to where you ended up?
Yeah, so I went into boot camp just as an airman. So I was a airman apprentice, and then you naturally over. I think it's like 6 months. I don't even know the date. You go to E3, which is just an airman. But what I did is I was in the air department on the carrier, and I didn't want to be in the air department. I wanted to strike out of that track, of that rate. So striking out is if I'm not a third class, right? So I'm not a E4, I'm still an E3. I can choose when I'm up for the advancement exam to E4, I can choose to strike a rate. I can pick a rate to try to take their E4 exam test to become a petty officer. Now, if you score within a certain margin on that exam, you can strike that rate, and they can put you in that department on the ship in that rate. So that's what I did. And I wanted to strike AS being Aviation Support Equipment Technician. So I wanted to work on all the equipment that was in support of the aircraft.
Right.
So I struck it. I almost made third class just striking, because it was a lot of just mechanical, electrical, hydraulic, pneumatic principles and things, which I knew. Where I did poorly was all the names and acronyms and types of equipment that I would be working on, because I'd never heard of it before. Like, Tilly, the crash and salvage crane, spotting dollies, like all these weird machines you're not going to see anywhere but on an aircraft carrier. So when they were asking questions about those machines, I'm like, C, I have no idea what this is.
You're just taking a shot, kind of like the ASVAB.
So then,
that's what they tell you. Just
that's right. Take a guess.
Pick some. Take a best guess, and it doesn't count against you.
Right.
And yeah, then, I remember they. Is that the same on the ASVAB? Because I can't remember. Because I took it once. Yeah. Years ago when I was a young buck.
But anyway, so I struck AS. The very next cycle, I took the AS exam for third class petty officer, passed it in the top 5% of the Navy. Then when I was up for E5, I took the exam, passed it, top 6% of the Navy, and then I got out as an E5. So I was a second class petty officer in the Navy, but I remember I ran a very unique position on an aircraft carrier. I was a flight deck troubleshooter. So as an AS, Aviation Support Equipment Technician, they work in the hangar bay on machines down in the shops. Troubleshooters, they are ASs that run the flight deck, doing all the real-time troubleshooting and machine repair during flight operations. So once I found out that I wanted that there was an a troubleshooting position on the flight deck, I struck the rate, and in 3 months after our import period, I was a GSE flight deck troubleshooter. So I was one of the only E3 flight deck troubleshooters in the Navy at the time, because it's generally held for E4 and above. So that was my track.
Yeah, but they're going to put you where they want you.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
They selected me.
Yep. Yeah, if you want to see some of that in action, if you follow LinkedIn, look up a Captain Chowda Hill. It's his nickname is Chowda. He's the present CEO of the Eisenhower.
All right, I'll find that when I drop the episode.
He posts like multiple times a day. He gets down and dirty with the guys in the shops and everything else. It's at first I was going, how can an officer be doing that? Well, it turns out it's part of a program to try to promote people coming in the Navy. So he brings, like different people from different parts of the ship, just enlisted people, up to the bridge, and interviews them a little bit, and sometimes writes about them, but talks about all of the different aspects of life on an aircraft carrier.
We'll definitely want to check that out. So here, I'm on this last term, and then you guys can offer your own terms. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read the definition, kind of like Jeopardy style. Don't sue me, Jeopardy. And then you guys try to guess what the term is. All right. So this particular term, the definition is: blue overalls worn when deployed out to sea may also refer to the anti-exposure suits used by air crews in the case of a water landing in cold environments.
Can you guys hear me?
A lot.
Yeah. It's known as a poopy suit.
Great. I've never heard that.
I saw it and I'm like, I gotta ask about this poopy suit. It's terrible.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, and we lost Howard, so they might have had a power outage.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna tell you, we're still recording, you and I. Going into this, I was like, I wonder what's going to happen on Howard's side, because last year he dropped off, came back on because he was at his home office. He was having internet problems.
Yeah, that dude. That dude is everywhere, man.
He's out there hunting for Sasquatch, man.
I thought he found him.
Every now and then he finds him, and then we come to find out it's just a statue or some guy in a costume. But, you know, someday, some way, it's possible. It's possible, you know. So you got any wild terms for us we can share for our second installment?
Man, it put me on the spot. I can't think of any. I mean, I do.
I don't know. What's
going on. I have something funny to, you know, something kind of.
Hello?
Hi, Howard.
Yeah. Can you hear us?
Can you hear us? That would be a negative Ghost Rider.
He's still really slow.
Yeah. Not personally, just your internet, Howard. Poor Howard. He always ruins our maintenance C stories.
Hey, no, I did want to say something funny talking about, you know, just maintenance and stuff like that. Counterintuitive when you think about it, not having been around it. We used to do like replenishments at sea. And replenishments at sea is where you come up alongside a supply ship and they literally do one of two things. They do vert reps. Hey, Howard.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was connected through my cell phone because we'd lost power earlier. And apparently Verizon just went dead in the area.
Well,
so I had a note. Yeah.
I had a note. I wrote it about 2 hours ago. I wonder what's going to happen on Howard's side this year.
Yeah, what's up with that? I'm the techie, right?
I think it's by design to keep us on our toes, and
that must be it.
Especially for Bryan, because he's just hanging on here. You know, it's a little bit later for him where he's at. He's an hour ahead of you, and
that's right.
You guys are both ahead of me. So he was just telling us a story.
And go ahead. Sorry, man.
I was filling time waiting for you, man. So no, what I was saying, something kind of funny is, you know, at when we're on deployment out at sea, doing 6 to 9 months of a deployment, the ship needs to be replenished, right? So, you know, to refill our stores, maybe bring on critical parts, medical supplies, food, whatever, ammunition a lot too. So we would have replenishments at sea. So one of two things would happen. We would pull up alongside another ship, a supply ship. They would connect with cables and stuff, and they would pull material and stores back and forth through the hangar bay. Or they do vert reps. So they'd be running SH-60 helicopters between both of the ships. So we have lots of forklifts on the ship, believe it or not. There's a lot of them. And they're used to move things around the hangar bay, to do those stores replenishments, move stuff off the flight deck, everything like that, right? Well, the aircraft carrier also has elevators. There's elevators that connect the hangar bay to the flight deck. So if you want to move aircraft up or down, they go out on these elevators and they get all the way up, and then they transfer the machines. When you're running a forklift on those elevators, you're not allowed to wear your seatbelt.
Yep.
Why do you think, Greg?
It's because it would be more dangerous if you're strapped in and something goes wrong than if you're not strapped in, where you could actually
what would go wrong? What would go wrong? What's the number one?
Egress.
Yes, but what would go wrong?
It would teeter. It could go cattywampus.
These elevators are on the side of the ship.
You go in the water.
Go in the water. You don't want to be strapped to a 15,000-pound forklift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, I mean, that just made me think of there's a movie called Officer and a Gentleman, and they're at they're attempting to become naval officers, aviators.
Mm-hmm.
It's officers training, and they got to go down this as if it's a simulated crash sequence if they were in an aircraft, but they have to try to unbuckle themselves, and one of the dudes, he can't do it, and they have to go down and rescue him. But man, a forklift, and in the ocean, that's has
there's
anybody
no
ever gone over? Have you ever seen anybody go over?
Yep.
Yeah,
not
really?
not on a forklift, but
not
get
on
blown off the side of a ship walking behind an aircraft.
Yeah.
They didn't find him.
Oh my God, really? That's terrible. Rest in peace.
It's 90 feet.
Yeah,
You're
also
hitting concrete.
they also sometimes they'd call man overboard drills to prepare, right? But also there have been times where people have called man overboard thinking they see someone, because sometimes you're in rough ass seas, man. I mean, the ship is pitching and yawing like ridiculously, right? And some people might see something like trash might blow over, or a life vest or a float coat or something will blow over, and people will see it, and they'll call a man overboard. So then they send
Which
the
is better safe than sorry.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So they send out the SH-60s with a swimmer to go rescue, trash sometimes, right? And after they secure man overboard, the CO will always come over and be like, it wasn't he'll say it wasn't actually a person. It'll say what it was. And then he'll be like, good job. We had muster in 5 minutes and 20 seconds.
Yeah. What he means by muster is when that happens, everybody on board ship has to be accounted for.
You have to report to your supervisors.
Yeah. It's like battle conditions. You have to go straight to your muster point. Everybody gets checked in.
Yeah, I've heard that term, but I didn't understand what it really meant, other than I was trying to kind of figure it out, that it's just basically kind of like get your shit together and be where you're supposed to be.
You have to
kinda. I mean,
you don't need to get your shit together. You want to get to there as quickly as you can.
Yeah. So like if we're pulling out to sea, we have a muster call. You go and you everybody kind of wherever it is, like we would meet in the hangar bay, my whole division, and they would account for whoever was on a watch already. And then they checked everybody off to see who was AWOL, who didn't make it onto the ship before we pulled out. So you're there until you're away from the pier. And it was a way of finding out if everybody's there.
Yeah. That's just, I mean, for civvies, it's kind of like a roll call.
It's exactly what it is.
Yeah. Well, first of all, guys, I really appreciate you joining me for this second installment, but we got one more part we got to do, and a little more serious part.
Mm-hmm.
Next week, and I'm gonna try to get this episode done and drop it on Veterans Day. And I started off with how important that is to me, and I've even told people, I don't care what your ilk is or whether you think one thing or another. I'm supremely, deeply thankful. I value our military and the sacrifice that you men and the women out there make for us, whether they've been in the shit or not. I don't pretend to understand it. I just respect it. I think it's incredible. But I'd like to ask each of you, just like I did last year, and we'll start with you, Bryan. Veterans Day is coming up next week. Any thoughts? What does it really mean to you? What kind of a message would you want to put out there as it relates to Veterans Day for 2024?
Yeah, so I don't know if I said this last time, and if I did, sorry. It is important to me, and it kind of summarizes like a lot of things in one kind of phrase. And I'm sure Howard's probably heard this phrase before, but it's any service member, veteran, retiree, 4 years, 20 years, 50 years, shitbag, not a shitbag, the best sailor you could ever think about, or Marine or whatever. That person wrote a check, a blank check to the United States government and the American people in the amount of anything up to their life. And I think it's just important to recognize that you don't have to do it. Whatever your reason is for doing it, for becoming a service member in any capacity, you don't have to. Something's driving you to do it. And once you do it, it's very likely that you will be changed. And And whether that's for the good or the bad, we need to recognize that they're doing something to the ultimate point or sacrifice that can be out of pure, uh, uh, you know, they're not being forced, right? It's on their own accord. It's something that they're doing in their free will. Sorry, that took a while to put that, but that's what I would say. I just think that there's this conception that, well, he was this and he was that, so his was more difficult or harder or better. But in reality, the check was written regardless. So that's just my kind of summarization of it.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, love to see the sweatshirt.
Yeah, my PT hoodie, Howard.
There it is.
It still kind of fits me.
Oh gosh, man. I'll put this into perspective. When I got out of the Navy, I had gained a little weight and I had a 29-inch waist. I ain't fitting into any of that. That wouldn't even go over my leg.
I got out of boot camp. I went into boot camp at like 188. Got out of boot camp at like 173. My wife, but girlfriend at the time, thought I was dying. And then got out of my 4-year service at 185 and was in the best shape of my life. Now I'm 215.
Yeah, lightweight. Yeah, I went in as a long distance runner at 181 pounds, was 215 right after getting out of boot camp, all the way until I left.
Yeah. Howard, I want to ask you that similar type question. Veterans Day.
Why I'm so glad Bryan went first.
Yeah.
No, I'll echo that, because I see veterans and Veterans Day year round, in my opinion, right? But that's a day that, has been set aside for people to think in terms of that volunteer sacrifice.
Volunteer, that's the good word.
Yeah, and you'll hear us. Sometimes, like today, one of the people in the class was a Marine. The other folks had not served. They had no idea what was going on when we started giving each other a little bit of hell. Excuse me. But it was a little warm there, so I've been trying to get fluids in. But so I see it as a day of reflection of those who volunteer. There are sacrifices beyond that written check. I mean, you're not well paid, even though the pay's far better than it was way back when. If you end up with a family during the time you're in service, it is even tougher on them. It's a tough life. I mean, you're living at or below poverty level, depending on where you're stationed. But you've got a level of camaraderie that ends up making it. I mean, I don't know a veteran who regrets the time they were in, including some that have lost limbs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They see that as a thing, and I echo the same thing. It's you write that check, whether you're in for 4 or you do your retirement, or you're a reservist or National Guard, or, well, we'll exclude the Air Force. No, just kidding.
And make a little room for.
And are the coasties really?
They didn't hear you, Howard. They're asleep in their.
In
nice rooms.
In a room like this, yeah. No, but. Yeah, we'll always rib each other. But it's funny. I've been places where you'll watch, there'll be a couple of military folks giving each other a hard time, and then a civilian says something, and then all heads turn.
Yeah,
you're allowed if you're part of the brother or sisterhood.
I've spent time. I finally got to meet you, Howard, this year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very thankful for that. I spent time with Bryan as well. Got to meet him in person finally, and I appreciate you for who you are and what you do and what you've done, where you've been. And I know military people from all the different branches, and I've spent time with them. I've heard stories, and I just have a deep appreciation for it for so many different reasons. What I love most is that you get a certain kind of realness and a certain kind of understanding of the world. And I think you can learn a lot from military people. And I just think anybody that hears this on Veterans Day, when we put this episode out, if you see a veteran, they will be wearing their retirement cap or something. You'll see them, and just take a moment to thank them. You don't have to rush them or anything like that. And, maybe you want to buy them a cup of coffee, but just thank them real quick. And you don't have to make a big ordeal out of it, because they know that you're just trying to convey appreciation for the sacrifice that they have made and the ultimate sacrifice that could have potentially happened. So, gentlemen, thank you. I appreciate you guys being with me for this second installment of Maintenance Sea Stories, and hang with me for just a second, guys. This episode is sponsored by Upkeep, purpose-built for maintenance, reliability, and operations teams. Our mobile-first CMMS and asset operations management solution puts work orders, inventory, and asset info in the palm of your hand. Designed for ease of use and adoption, Upkeep aligns your team for peak business performance. Transform your operations, transform your success with the multi-platform solution of Upkeep. Visit upkeep.com/CMMSradio to receive a dedicated custom discovery session. Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project. Visit CMMSradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS, from selection to implementation, to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.